Many small businesses here in the Lowcountry are struggling due to the coronavirus outbreak. Today, I talk one-on-one with Lowcountry Local First Executive Director Jamee Haley for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Jamee Haley, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. It's so good to see you.
You're very welcome. Obviously, you are the executive director of Lowcountry Local First, and obviously you deal a lot with a lot of small businesses here in the Lowcountry, and most of those businesses right now are being impacted by COVID-19. As a matter of fact, you wrote a commentary in the Post and Courier on May 14th, and the headline reads this: commentary, will we have the guts to do things differently? And that's obviously a question mark afterwards. Let me go to the first paragraph. It says this, quote, once the panic that is subsides, if it does subside, we will be mistaken to not pause long enough to think about the future of our city, region, and country through a new lens. Jamie, let me ask you this. What lens are you looking at when you think about Charleston and its future?
I'm thinking about a lens of equity. So I think that is a lens that we as a country and as a region and as a city need to be thinking about. We should have been thinking about it many years ago, but now we have a whole lot more work to do. I also think that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to pause and to figure out what's not been working, or what has. When we talk about systems change, we're saying the system was working exactly how it was meant to work, which is not what builds community wealth. So I think we need to think about what kind of zoning changes need to happen. I think we need to think about what type of support that we're providing to small businesses and to minority businesses, and how can we do things a little bit differently that could make a significant change in our communities.
And let me go on to the other one, because you said this, quote, Charleston's real estate boom has been like a Girls Gone Wild video of investors clamoring to own a piece of the holy city. This frenzy has driven up real estate prices to a point where many of the businesses with owners who are actually living here in Charleston and were struggling to make ends meet before the pandemic will more likely not make it post-COVID-19. How are real estate prices right now?
So right now, I have not seen that they're dropping yet. I anticipate that they will, as we're seeing the number of empty retail and restaurant spaces increase in the area, particularly downtown. But I think it was between 2018 and 2019, we saw a 26% increase in commercial real estate prices. And businesses' revenues are not increasing at that same rate, particularly now. When this first happened, when we first found out about the pandemic and we're thinking about what we could do, I reached out to a lot of the commercial property owners that are locally based here in Charleston, and I asked them if they had thoughts and ideas about how they're going to work with their tenants. Because, in all honesty, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? So if you've got a tenant who's been a great tenant for you already, why wouldn't you do everything that you can to try to help them during this time when they have absolutely no control over the success of their business due to this pandemic?
Let me go back to equity. What was that quality of equity before the COVID-19, and what is it now?
Well, I feel like, it's pretty apparent when you look at the decreasing population of Black people on the downtown Charleston, right? In Charleston in general. We're seeing increased gentrification, which is part of the development that's happening and has been happening for many, many, many years. And then we're losing a lot of our Black-owned businesses, which are so much a part of our culture and our economy. So we need to do what we can to try to support those businesses. Statistically, after a recession, that Black-owned businesses have a harder time making it through that period. So we want to make sure, as a city, as an organization, that we're doing everything that we can to support small businesses, but in particular, we need to see how we can support the Black-owned businesses in our community.
What is the ideal comprehensive plan for minority-owned businesses right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know that I have the entire answer to that, but I think that it's. I would love to see a legacy business, um, ordinance in place that would help support businesses that have been in the area for a long time, so that they are not bought up by real estate developers, so their property isn't bought up by real estate developers. Bertha's is a great example. Dave's Seafood is a great example. And then also to support entrepreneurship with the minority community, because there's a lot of people who are considered working poor. So they're working 2 or 3 jobs in order to make ends meet and to support their families. They've got a fabulous idea of a business that they'd like to start. And so that's something that our organization started doing last year, is providing these entrepreneurship programs, and we've had great success. So what can we do to, take some of the complication out of applying for business licenses or getting permits for opening a new establishment? So all of these kinds of things are what we're looking at. We're also working with the local municipalities just to encourage them to put their business licenses in Spanish, so that those individuals in the Hispanic community have also an equal opportunity to start and run and own a business. We really believe that, if we're talking about equity, ownership matters. Just like home ownership matters, business ownership matters, and building generational wealth.
What is the equal opportunity when it comes to the process of applying for a business license, particularly for a minority?
Well, I think it's the idea that we need to have them streamlined across the municipalities, right? Because if I, say I have a landscaping company, I'm not going to just do landscaping in the city of Charleston. I'm going to do it in Mount Pleasant and North Charleston and Goose Creek and Moncks Corner and Somerville. And so that piece of it needs to be streamlined so that it's as easy as possible. But the biggest piece is really sort of the permitting. If you're trying to open up a business and you don't know which office to go to, and is it if you're trying to open up a restaurant, is it DHEC? What does the fire marshal have to say? What does the city have to say? If you're trying to go through BAR or the design review board, and a lot of those decision-making processes within those entities are very arbitrary. So it's not like, okay, here is exactly the type of building that we want to see built in this area. It's like, oh, I presented you a set of designs, and the design review board can go, yeah, we really don't like that. Could you come back with something else? Well, it's a very expensive hurdle for any business to have to do that.
And you talked earlier about the minority businesses. How many of those small businesses are here locally in Charleston?
That's a great question. If you are not very many, right? So we've got for the state, about 30% of the population identifies as African American, but only 10% of businesses within that African American, only 10% of those African Americans own businesses. So I think when you're talking about an area like the city of Charleston, where real estate is so expensive that we're seeing even fewer minority businesses. I mean, we know that. All you have to do is look around, and we see the loss of businesses all the time. And right now, an average business has about 26 days of working capital, right? We found that out during COVID, and a restaurant has about 16. But if you are a minority-owned business, you have about 2 weeks. So we need to shift where we're spending our money as a community and as a government and as businesses to try to support as many minority-owned businesses as we possibly can as well.
Where should a shift happen? Where should it go?
Well, I think that businesses need to look internally at where they're procuring their goods and services, and then looking at what goods and services that they need, and how many of those goods and services can they shift to minority-owned businesses. I think that would make a significant impact on the community. And if we're looking at how we look at economic development through a lens of equity, that would certainly be one way to do that.
And you talked earlier about capital. Let me go back or go further down to the column that you wrote for the Post-Inquirer in May. You said this quote, will property owners be willing to work with tenants, as you mentioned, to provide affordable commercial space for those brave souls and tenacious entrepreneurs willing to take the leap? Will business owners rethink their growth goals, pay employees a living wage, and build a strategy that allows for more than 27 days of operating capital? What is the growth and where's the capital right now?
Well, growth, I think, well, we're seeing it in terms of growth in the development world, right? And we are seeing businesses who are being really creative, and some of them are growing right now. I mean, you know it, you've seen it as well, and it's interesting, like sort of something that they've been thinking about for a while as an addition to what they've already been doing is it had to quickly be implemented. I mean, we've had to do that as an organization. I think in terms of capital, as far as it goes for the businesses and making sure that they have more cash reserves than they typically do, I think part of it is going to be looking at how they diversify. I mean, that's going to be a big piece of that, right? So how can I diversify so I'm not entirely dependent on the tourist economy? Because the tourist economy, of course, is one that is not, we're seeing it right now. It's not something that is going to sustain us for the long run. And we talk to business owners who have locations here and then they have locations elsewhere. Maybe it's in Columbia or Greenville that's not so dependent on tourism. Those businesses are doing better. So that should tell us all something, right? Or if I've got a product and my outlet is solely restaurants, I need to think about what other outlets there are for my product so that I can make sure that my business can sustain itself. I think right now, while we're still dealing with the stress and the challenges of a pandemic, it's hard to think about how do we grow that capital for our business. But we do need to do everything that we can to for businesses to increase those reserves, which is, like I said, incredibly challenging right now.
And you go on to say this too, quote, allow businesses that create experiences for customers like breweries, distilleries, and light manufacturing to exist in the historic district. These are the experiences that both locals and visitors desire. Create more equitable opportunities for people of color. This goes back to the first and second recommendations. But let's also make sure that minority businesses are not pressured out of the area and instead make more room, that is, for more minority businesses so that Charleston isn't just a museum for the labor force upon the slave to build a city for tourists to enjoy. What will be the equitable future for minorities?
Well, I think it'd be fantastic if the city would start a minority business incubator. I mean, a physical location where you could establish your business, where you could have a storefront or a restaurant or a, whatever, or if you're a service provider, whatever that might look like. We've, as we're seeing, empty spaces increase, it would be fantastic if we see the city step up and take one of those spaces to be able to incubate businesses. I mean, we're doing this over on in the core Cherokee neighborhood right now on a very, very, minuscule scale. We got a little bakery that's going to be opening up. And I think that is one of the ways that we can help, increase the number of minority businesses that we have on the peninsula. I think it's going to be, I think it's a missed opportunity that we're not, that to my understanding anyway, that there's not going to be a restaurant in the new African American Museum that features Gullah cuisine. That is, if you're in that museum and you are learning about the history and the culture of the Gullah Geechee people, and then you can't easily walk out the door to sample some of that food. I feel like that's such a missed opportunity to really give people not just the history, but the experience of this place.
And what are the other missed opportunities in this area for minorities as you see it?
Well, I mean, I think that I think it's kind of what I said before. Like, I think we need to provide more incubation period opportunities for businesses. I think the market could say, we're going to set a percentage of the market, the downtown market opportunities for minority businesses. There are things that we can do that we just need the will of the people who are in charge to make them happen. So those are just a few ideas of things that we could do to help increase the number of minority businesses. And like I mentioned earlier, the idea of a legacy business. So there are cities that have done that in the past, where they have sort of a legacy business program, much like, the Historic Preservation Society has the Coropolis Awards, right? So, providing that business with, some block funding or support, so that the businesses that are so much a fabric of this community are not pushed out by rising real estate costs.
As a matter of fact, you said that in your column. You said this quote, but what have we learned? And will we have the guts to do anything differently as we move forward? And you also said this too, when it comes to obviously real estate, you said, I predict that we will have an excess of empty real estate in the area. What areas will be affected in your mind?
Well, I think it's mostly going to be the peninsula, just because of the cost of real estate in that area. But it's not going to entirely be that. But I think that's where it's going to be the most predominant, right? It will be interesting to see in a year from now how many empty storefronts we have. We had a lot of them during the recession, right? 2007, 2008, 2009, we had a lot of empty storefronts. But that's also when developers came in and they started buying up a lot of the property. And so, the lease rates that were given to a lot of businesses then have now or are expiring. So those have increased significantly. And my hope is that we'll start to see those prices go back down to something that's actually manageable for a small business owner, so that we can, that we can build up the small business community that's so the most significant part of our economy, right? So we need to do what we can to try to support those businesses, particularly now.
And you've heard the stories, and many other people have heard the stories about people who are still waiting on unemployment. Is that the same situation with small businesses when it comes to PPPs?
I think the what's happening with PPP is that if you did not have a relationship with your bank or any type of commercial loan, you are often left out of that process. So then for people who are coming to us, it was then trying to identify another lender who would work with them. And, there are other lenders. We have a great CDFI in Greenville, Community Works, who has been fantastic and working with as many individuals as they can. And some of our local banks as well, our community-based banks, have also been really great about stepping up and working with people that were not previous clients of theirs. So I think that there was a lot of fear with the business community of, and rightly so, of being, strapped with a loan. And right now is not a time when any small business wants to have a loan hanging over their head, right? When they don't even know how long they're going to be able to keep their doors open. So the idea of the loan forgiveness being as accessible as possible, I think has really been helpful in getting more businesses to apply for the funding.
What ideal proposal do you want to see from the United States House and Senate right now?
Well, I do like this idea of that they're talking about of loans that were under $150,000 with PPP being either the forgiveness application being streamlined so it's not so lengthy or automatically forgiven. Um, we probably need to extend the unemployment, the additional unemployment benefits, and maybe those get lowered somewhat because I know that a lot of people are making more money collecting unemployment than they are going to work. But I also think that speaks to the fact that we're not paying people a living wage. So that needs to be addressed at some point at a state level as far as increasing the minimum wage. But at a federal level, there's so much that needs to be tackled, but I would say, extending PPP beyond August 8th so that people can continue putting more funding into PPP. I think there's one proposal from the House that's $3 trillion, and from the Senate is $1 trillion is what they're proposing. But adding in additional funding so that in the fall, businesses are, when they run out of their, whether they went to 8-week or they did the 24-week PPP, they have an opportunity to apply for more funding to keep more people employed and ideally off of unemployment. We need to see those funds expanded to be able to support businesses who are need a little bit of funding for the pivoting that they're having to do right now. So restaurants are always the most visible example and the ones that are really been hit the hardest. But, if you're a restaurant and now you're trying to provide outdoor dining, if you've got to go and buy tables and umbrellas and, chairs and, do all of the things and set up some sort of an online, ordering system, whatever it might be, those are things that we're doing to provide safe social distancing, but are expensive. So ideally, those funds could be used for something like that as well. A challenge that I know that we're going to have, that small businesses are going to be facing, is school, right? So if I'm a parent or I own a business and I've got children, or my employees have children, what happens when and if they go back to school? So that's going to be an interesting piece of this to see how that gets resolved, because the health and safety of our families and our children and our employees needs to be at the forefront of the conversation. And so how do we have that conversation and still help these small businesses?
What conversation do you want to have about small businesses 6 months from now?
Oh gosh, I hope it's a much more optimistic one. I look for stories of innovation, right? And I'm constantly trying to listen to those types of podcasts and seeing how businesses are innovating during this time, because I think that's very inspiring, right? So if we don't come out of this time and we haven't all learned something, and maybe that the learning is just like, okay, I need to do a better job of making sure that I have a larger cash reserve, or maybe it's that I need to shift some of my spending with my business to minority-owned businesses, or I have created this new product that not only is going to endure beyond, is very viable during this time, is going to endure beyond this moment, right? So that this is a new way of life. I think that it's been interesting to see many of our farmers who are actually doing well. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be detrimental because we've lost the restaurant, a big piece of the restaurant market. Not, of course, not all of the restaurant market, but at the same time, we've seen an increase in demand for local food from consumers. So a lot of those farmers who had what we call CSAs, community supported agriculture programs, they're seeing those programs increase. So to me, in 6 months' time, I'm really looking for those those stories of inspiration that others can learn from as well.
Jamee Haley, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's my pleasure, Quintin. So good to see you.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Oh,